Hey guys, tonight we settle into the slow-burning story of a man whose silence outlived his reputation, whose loyalty was louder than any oath. Until one day, it wasn't. Picture this, a leather chair, cracked and sunken, still warm from the weight of decisions too heavy for daylight. The neon flickers outside an empty social club in Bensonhurst. Smoke hangs mid-air, frozen like time itself. Sammy Gravano is sitting alone, staring at the floor as if it might offer absolution. Outside, Brooklyn exhales, late, indifferent, sleepless. This isn't a story with clear heroes or endings wrapped in bows. This is a story about the art of switching sides without looking back. About knowing you're the second most dangerous man in the room, and then becoming the most dangerous just by changing your answer. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is. I love knowing where these stories land across the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Gravano doesn't blink much anymore. He just stares, as if trying to see through time. The club is mostly quiet, save for the soft clink of a spoon hitting glass and the occasional thump of distant nightlife. Someone else's life, not his. The others have left. The room smells of pine cleaner and stale cigars. He sits at the table they once shared. Capos, button men, talkers who only spoke when it didn't matter. The padded booth beside him still has a dent where Gotti sat the night he made Sammy underboss. That night, the room buzzed like a loaded circuit. Now it hums like a machine that's still on, but has no job left to do. Sammy reaches for his drink, finds only the condensation ring it left behind. Fitting. He isn't hiding tonight. He's remembering. And remembering is more dangerous than hiding. This club once held power, the way churches hold confessions. Men whispered over meatballs and marinara, but the true deals were in the silences between. That's where Sammy learned to listen. That's where he learned to weigh a pause like a stack of cash. Outside, headlights stretch across the blinds and disappear. It's late enough that even the cops aren't cruising much. And Sammy? He's too known to hide, too infamous to be forgotten, and too quiet now to be easily remembered. And that, in a way, keeps him safe, like a ghost in reverse, still alive, but fading by choice. What people often forget is how ordinary betrayal begins, not with fanfare or grand announcements, but with small realizations that you're the one driving the car, but someone else keeps grabbing the wheel, that the respect you thought was yours was rented, not earned. Gravano didn't betray the mob because he was scared. He did it because the cost of staying loyal had climbed higher than the cost of talking. And in his world, price always beats principle. Some say it all started right here, in this very room, when Gotti joked about Sammy's crew being too efficient. That joke stung, wrapped in charisma, dipped in menace. Gravano laughed. Everyone did. But something shifted. A pin dropped on the map between brotherhood and betrayal. And here's a historical note to place us firmly in this moment. It's late 1990, and the Justice Department has just unveiled a new stack of indictments targeting New York's 5 families. The feds are learning how to listen better. Tapes, bugs, informants. The streets are changing, and even the streets can hear it. Sammy leans back in his chair. It creaks, protests. He doesn't. This is what the beginning of an ending looks like. Not with bullets, but with absence. Absence of trust, absence of cover, absence of that old electric fear that used to buzz when he entered a room. Now, no one flinches. And that's the cruelest irony. He's safer now than ever before, but only because the people who once feared him think he's already dead inside. He sighs. That particular sigh, the kind that rolls down your spine like cold syrup. He remembers the first time he realized he could be invisible, not to the world, but to the men who once swore their lives to him. That's when the quiet started to grow teeth, so he sits. Not like a man waiting for something, but like a man who's finally stopped running from the thing that always walked beside him anyway. His own shadow, now tired of chasing. And if you're wondering what happens next, well, remember this chair. Remember this silence. Because tomorrow, this chair will be empty. And the silence, it'll have a new name. Cooperation. Brooklyn doesn't sleep. It paces. Long after the storefronts go dark, after the deli men roll down their metal grates and flick off the neon buzz, the borough hums with the weight of 1,000 half-finished stories. And on a certain block in Bensonhurst, decades before the leather chair turned cold, a boy named Salvatore Gravano learns to read that hum like scripture. He's not yet Sammy, just a kid with restless fists and ears trained on grown-up conversations he wasn't meant to hear. The sidewalks are cracked and patterned like old scars, and the apartment windows blink with tiny domestic wars. Someone yelling about sauce, someone yelling about bills. Brooklyn sings in arguments. Gravano's block isn't glamorous. It's all brick, steam, and the kind of laundry you hang out of guilt, not hope. Fathers with collars stained from 2 jobs. Mothers with knuckles red from scrubbing life into their children's lives. It's here, among stoops and sneakers with no laces, that he learns what loyalty looks like. Not from books, but from watching which kids get protected when the cops come, and which ones don't. His first lesson in power comes courtesy of a kid named Benny, 3 years older and twice as mean. Benny takes Sammy's comic book on a Tuesday. On Thursday, Sammy breaks his nose with a rock wrapped in a sock. No threats, no follow-up, just a message written in pain. Benny never bothers him again. The adults whisper behind closed doors, but Sammy listens with intent. He learns early that the people who talk too much rarely last. It's the ones who nod, who memorize, who say, "I got you," without blinking. Those are the ones who move forward. And Sammy, he's already watching the older kids disappear into backroom delis, emerge with envelopes, gold chains, and a new vocabulary of nods and glances. There's one man, Dominic, they call him Dom the Glove, who gives young Sammy a $5 bill just for keeping his mouth shut after witnessing a fist fight in the alley. It's the first time silence pays off, and the lesson lodges itself somewhere deep. You don't always have to swing to win. Sometimes standing still is louder. Many people still think that Gravano's criminality was inevitable, that it was just the Brooklyn environment growing its own weeds. But so what do you think? Can a kid raised on loyalty ever escape the debts it collects? By the time he's 12, Sammy's instinct for rank is uncanny. He knows who answers to whom, who takes the front seat, who brings the food, and who always eats first. He watches these things, like a wolf cub learning the pack's rituals. There's power in the pattern, and he wants it. His father, Giorlando Gravano, is not impressed. A tailor with strict rules and tired eyes, Giorlando wants discipline, respect, and structure. No trouble, no noise, no headlines. But Sammy? Sammy thrives where order fades, where rules blur and shadows stretch. Still, the old man's lectures leave a mark. When Sammy gets caught stealing a toy from the corner store, Jorlando doesn't yell. He shames, makes him return it, makes him apologize. And worse, he makes him sit through an hour-long speech about family name and real work. Sammy listens, but the shine is already gone. That toy, that thrill, it didn't come from ownership. It came from taking. One day, Sammy watches his dad press a suit. Steam hisses. Fabric smooths under practiced hands. There's an art to it. Precision. A different kind of power. But all Sammy sees is a man bending to labor. A man whose life has been stitched together by other men's expectations. So, instead of following the iron's hiss, he follows the men in Cadillacs. He memorizes the way Dom the Glove lights his cigarette. Left thumb, quick spark, no eye contact. He notices how cash moves in thick wads, not wallets. He sees the nod that means yes, the shrug that means run. By high school, Sammy's not in class much. He's doing collections for small-time guys, threatening to let the grown-ups handle it if someone's late on a payment. He doesn't smile when he says it, and that makes it scarier. He's 5'5", but somehow bigger in shadow. And let's set a fact here to ground us. In the 1960s, juvenile crime in New York begins to spike, especially among working-class neighborhoods like Bensonhurst. But unlike most kids dragged into the system, Gravano seems to float above it. He doesn't just survive, he observes, learns, stores everything. And even as the years roll forward, Brooklyn doesn't change much. It just gets louder, more desperate. The players shift, but the rules, always the same. Respect, silence, loyalty, or else. Sammy walks those streets with a quiet that unnerves even the older kids. He doesn't posture, he doesn't brag, he just watches, waits, and strikes when needed. That's the first sign, really, the composure, the calm before and after violence. It's not the fist that makes the man, it's the stillness that follows. And though he doesn't know it yet, that quiet, precise, patient, unsettling will become his trademark. The thing that makes him both trustworthy and terrifying. The thing that earns him a seat at tables most men never see. Brooklyn teaches him, molds him, but never quite owns him. Because even at 15, Sammy Gravano is not just a product of his environment. He's already tailoring his own. The first time blood lands on Sammy Gravano's knuckles, it isn't planned. It's a blur of instinct, rage, and the undeniable thrill of proving something, maybe to himself, maybe to everyone else watching. The alley behind the pool hall smells like cigarettes, warm garbage, and someone's dinner getting cold in a foil container. The pavement's still wet from a morning drizzle, and the echoes of the jukebox from inside bleed through the brick like a dying heartbeat. He doesn't remember the kid's name, just the slicked back hair and the smirk that didn't survive the second punch. There's a push, a word about his sister, and then Sammy's knuckles are kissing teeth. He gets 2 punches in before someone yells, and it's over. The other kid bleeds, backs off, and something about Sammy changes right there. It's not that he enjoys it, it's that he realizes he's good at it, and more importantly, people notice. He walks back into the pool hall and doesn't have to wait for a cue stick anymore. One of the older guys, Frankie Bottles, claps him on the back and grins. "Kid's got bark and bite," he says. "And Sammy?" He doesn't smile. He nods like it's something he's owed all along. That fight isn't about money or turf. It's about place. territory not marked with lines or fences, but with looks, reactions, respect. Gravano learns quickly that a punch thrown at the right time says more than 100 words. After that day, the neighborhood changes its posture around him. Younger kids nod first. Shopkeepers greet him more carefully. And the men in Cadillacs start to see him differently. Not as a loudmouth, not as a wannabe, but as someone willing. Willing to do what needs doing, without applause or explanation. That willingness gets tested not long after, when one of his cousins, Tommy, finds himself in trouble with a local bookie. Owes $200, can't pay, won't talk. The kind of thing that usually ends with broken fingers. But instead of stepping aside, Sammy steps in. He walks into the back of a pizzeria with 2 20s, a fake smile, and a real promise. Give his cousin more time, or take it out of Sammy. He says it without flinching, even as the bookie's goons laugh. But there's something in his tone, something too calm, too resolved, that makes them pause. One of them, Joey Notch, leans in and says, "You got guts, kid." And from then on, he's no longer just Sammy. He's Sammy the Bull. The nickname comes fast, almost too fast, but it sticks like blood on a white shirt. There's debate to this day about how he got that name. Some say it was that pizzeria moment. Others swear it was a job gone wrong in Bay Ridge, where Sammy chased down a thief who snatched an envelope mid-deal. He ran like a bull, someone reportedly said. Many people still think that Gravano himself had no idea why the name stuck. But so what do you think? Does it even matter when the name starts walking into rooms before you do? From then on, the fights are different. Not just scraps, statements. He becomes a kind of guardian for the kids in his orbit. If someone needs protection, if a debt goes unpaid, if a girlfriend gets slapped by the wrong guy, Sammy steps in. Sometimes with words, but more often with the quiet violence that leaves no room for misunderstanding. There's one night, cold and bitter, when a rival crew from Gravesend cuts through Sammy's block, tagging walls and swaggering loud. Gravano doesn't wait. He gathers 3 of his boys, Richie, Paul, and Nicky, and they corner the crew near a laundromat. No weapons, just fists and fury. The Gravesend boys walk away limping, and though no one says it aloud, everyone knows. This block now belongs to Sammy Gravano, and let's anchor this with a real-world frame. During the 1970s, while the major 5 families of New York, Gambino, Genovese, Lucchese, Bonanno, and Colombo, tightened their grips on unions and construction, a new generation of street soldiers was rising. Kids like Gravano, smart enough to listen and tough enough to enforce, became the arteries feeding these criminal empires from below. Back in the neighborhood, Gravano's influence grows. He starts earning, small at first. Loan collections, stolen goods, protection money from guys who don't need protection but pay anyway. It's not glamorous. It's late nights, bloody knuckles, and cash that smells like fear and gasoline. But it's his, earned in sweat and silence. And amid it all, there's his crew. Not friends, brothers, boys who would throw punches in his name, who would stash a weapon without asking why. Paulie once took a bottle to the head in a bodega just for standing next to Sammy during a tense shakedown. Didn't flinch, didn't complain. Loyalty, not logic. They'd gather on stoops and in basements, huddled around warm pizza boxes and half-finished beers, mapping out their next move with laughter that always seemed too loud for the risks they were taking. But that's the thing about youth. It doesn't believe in consequence. And yet, for Sammy, consequence was never far. Every choice etched another line on the roadmap leading him straight into the underworld. But if you'd asked him then, he'd have told you he wasn't heading anywhere. He was already there, just waiting for someone to open the right door. That door, as it turned out, would soon creak open, and when it did, the boy who once swung fists in alleys would walk through it with steady feet, ready to trade punches for power. It's easy to picture mobsters as born into the life, cooked into it like marinara simmering on a back burner. But for Sammy Gravano, there's a blueprint first, a household rhythm where pride is ironed, not inherited. His father, Giorlando, stoic, stern, stitched into the old-school Italian model of respectability, believes deeply in labor, in order, in the dignity of sweat. And he doesn't hide his disappointment when he sees his son slipping from that framework like thread from an unraveling cuff. They don't argue much, not out loud, but every silence between them is a paragraph. Giorlando keeps his shoulders straight, his tools sharp, his opinions sharper. He teaches Sammy how to press pleats, hem cuffs, measure twice. There's poetry in the precision, but Sammy's eyes drift to the street, to the way Dom the Glove's Cadillac purrs past their shop like a sermon, to the way respect is earned with a glance, not a stitch. One night, Giorlando finds a roll of bills in Sammy's jacket. Too thick, too dirty. No lectures, just a long look across the dinner table. Sammy chews slowly, staring down his peas. No one speaks. His mother fidgets with a spoon. His sister keeps her eyes on the plate, and the tension curls like smoke from an overboiled pot. Later, the father says quietly, "You work with your hands, you sleep well." Sammy replies, "I sleep fine." He doesn't, of course. The money's good, but it comes at night, and it comes fast. He's doing pickups now for low-level guys with names like Fat Jimmy and Lenny Bagels. He moves numbers, envelopes, sometimes watches doors. It's never the job that matters. It's who trusts him to do it. There's a certain thrill in being noticed. One day, he's asked to stand lookout while a meeting takes place in the back of a bakery. It's uneventful. But afterward, Big Sal, who runs numbers for a Gambino-connected guy, tosses Sammy a folded 20 and says, "You got good ears, kid. Use 'em." It isn't long before those ears start hearing the cadence of something more structured. Not chaos, not street fights, but order. The mob, contrary to Hollywood, isn't all flash and blood. It's hierarchy, respect, schedule, and young Gravano. He loves a good structure, as long as he's the one rising through it. But even so, his father's voice lingers. Every time Sammy pulls a job, he hears that quiet judgment, that simple phrase, "You work with your hands, you sleep well." And yet, when he counts out a week's earnings with those same hands, something inside whispers, "This is what power feels like." Still, there are limits. Gravano is smart enough to keep one foot in each world. He helps his dad at the shop on weekends. He takes his little sister to school when his mother asks. He nods respectfully to neighbors, says, "Yes, ma'am," holds the door. The duality is tight, but manageable, for now. Historical side note. During the mid to late 1970s, the Gambino family was undergoing subtle but seismic shifts in leadership after the death of Carlo Gambino in 1976. That vacuum left room for men like Paul Castellano and later John Gotti to reshape the power structure. This would become the very storm Gravano stepped into and later steered. But for now, he's still rising. He gets his first true initiation of sorts when he's asked to drive. Not just anywhere, but a long ride upstate where no names are spoken, and the duffel bag in the trunk makes a soft, ominous thump every time they hit a bump. No questions, no glances. Just cold air, nervous silence, and a 3-hour return trip that ends with someone patting Sammy on the shoulder and saying, "You kept your eyes forward." That matters. That's the job. That's always the job. Keep your eyes forward. Back in Bensonhurst, he starts getting approached with more frequency. Little things. "You seen Frankie?" Or, "Tell Tony we need him Tuesday." He becomes a conduit, fluid, useful, respected, not flashy, not yet, but inevitable. Meanwhile, the divide at home widens. His father's disappointment turns into something quieter. Distance. The two men, one aging and one forming, speak less. The house echoes with it. His mother tries to bridge the gap with food, stories, small talk, but it's no use. Gravano's trajectory is now outward, upward, elsewhere. One afternoon, Giorlando stands in the doorway, watching his son tie his shoes with a cigarette already lit. "You keep going where you're going," he says. "You won't come back wearing your own name." Sammy pauses, that hits, and it proves true. Because in a few years' time, Sammy the Bull will be bigger than Salvatore Gravano. The man, the myth, the betrayal. That all lives later. But it begins here, in a small Brooklyn kitchen, with a father's warning floating like dust in the air. Many people still think that Gravano regretted losing his father's respect more than he ever feared prison time. So what do you think? Can a man outrun the shadow of the man who raised him? By now, Gravano knows exactly how this world works. Respect first, then money, then fear. He's got 2 out of 3. And fear? That comes easier than you'd think. But that doesn't mean he's cold. Not yet. He still visits his aunt on Sundays, still remembers birthdays, still calls his mother just to say hi. The humanity clings. It always does in the early years. What he doesn't know is how quickly those pieces get carved away once the real weight of the family falls on your shoulders. Once the oath is spoken. Once silence isn't just a smart choice. It's a matter of life or death. And that silence, he's already practicing. There's a difference between drifting into the mob and being chosen by it. Sammy Gravano never simply wandered into power. He was summoned. Not with fanfare or gold rings glinting under chandeliers, but with quiet nods in parked cars, invitations to unremarkable addresses, and questions that tested more than loyalty. They tested silence. They tested nerve. It's 1976 when he joins the DeMio crew, one of the Gambino family's more feared subgroups, known for their, let's call them, thorough methods. But even then, Gravano doesn't stay long. He's a student of patterns, and something about the DeMio rhythm, the erratic violence, the lack of boundaries, feels too loud for his style, too messy. Sammy doesn't mind blood, but he hates attention. And Roy DeMio? That man collected both. Instead, Gravano finds a better fit with Toto Arello, a respected capo known for being both cautious and lethal. Toto likes him immediately. Sammy has the 3 things most young soldiers lack: discretion, consistency, and restraint. He doesn't talk about jobs he hasn't been asked to do. He doesn't linger where he's not invited. And most importantly, he never tries to look like he belongs. He just does. The induction isn't immediate. That comes later. First, there are errands. Earnings, as they're politely called. A construction job here, an envelope there. Gravano starts running a small crew of his own, guys he trusts. Richie, who's good with numbers. Polly, who's good with fists. Tommy, who's good at smiling while carrying bad news. It's around this time that Sammy gets his first sit-down, an informal one, with Tadu and two other made guys. It's in the back of a seafood joint that smells like ambition and overcooked clams. They talk politics, union leverage, payouts. But nobody really cares what Sammy says. They care how he listens, how he absorbs. Afterward, Tato lights a cigarette and says, "You hear good, Sammy. That's better than talking." And so his stock rises. A factual note worth dropping here. In the late 1970s, the Gambino family had nearly 500 made men and over 1,000 associates. The competition for influence wasn't a sprint, it was a chess match, and Gravano, despite the nickname The Bull, plays like a tactician, quietly, precisely. Eventually, the offer comes, not a promotion, not a request, a calling. Becoming a made man isn't like joining a club. It's a ceremony, a blood ritual. The stories are true. The saint card, the prick of the finger, the candlelit vow to Cosa Nostra. To this thing of ours, Gravano enters the room as a man with respect. He leaves as a man with responsibility. Many people still think the mob was purely about power. But so what do you think? Can a system built entirely on silence and honor truly survive without someone like Sammy? From that day on, he's not just another earner. He's a soldier. And more than that, he's trusted. Which means he starts to carry out jobs that aren't written down. Hits that don't get whispered about. Messages that don't come in envelopes, but in warnings that echo louder than gunshots. And the thing is, he's good at it. Too good, some say. His first sanctioned hit as a made man comes quietly. A man in Queens owes too much, talks too much, is too much. Gravano doesn't ask why. He just drives, waits, walks in, and delivers. No mess, no panic. Just silence, and then the quietest okay from the man beside him. The final word before erasure. He never speaks of it afterward. Not even to his closest crew. That silence earns him another nickname, muttered once at a wake. The Undertaker. But that one doesn't stick. The Bull is already carved in. Back in Brooklyn, Gravano becomes a fixture. He owns clubs now, construction companies, garbage routes, all legitimate, mostly. He learns the language of unions, the power of bids, and how a handshake in the right room is worth more than 10 bricks of cash. And this is where he begins to blur, the man and the machine. Gravano builds himself into something bigger than muscle, smarter than fear. He's rising, yes, but not flashy like Gotti would one day be. No silk suits, no pinky rings. Sammy prefers steel over sparkle, control over spectacle. That's why his crew respects him. He doesn't ask anyone to do what he wouldn't. He doesn't talk down. He doesn't micromanage. And when he gives an order, it's clear, calm, final. One story floats among the guys, never quite confirmed, that Sammy once sat across from a man who'd betrayed Tato's trust. Sat for a full 10 minutes before speaking. When he finally did, he simply said, "You know what happens next, right?" The man nodded. And that was that. He's not a psychopath. He feels things. He regrets. Sometimes. But in his world, regret doesn't undo anything. It just makes you slow. And slow people don't last long in Bensonhurst. As Gravano grows into his role, his business acumen becomes as sharp as his instincts. He starts to notice flaws in how the family manages construction. Too many hands in the pot, not enough organization. So he steps in, smooths it out, earns more. Quietly, efficiently, that catches attention. And not just Tato's anymore, higher up, all the way to John Gotti. But we're not there yet. For now, Sammy Gravano is in his prime. Respected, feared, relied on. He's got crews under him, businesses generating stacks of clean and dirty cash, and a reputation that walks into the room before he does. Still, there are shadows he doesn't talk about, dreams he doesn't mention, names he avoids saying. Because in this life, as Gravano well knows, the higher you rise, the further you fall. And there's always someone watching the ladder. The warehouse smells like old oil and newer lies. There's a sharp tang in the air, metal, sweat, and the acrid bite of tension. Gravano stands just inside the entrance, eyes adjusting to the dark, his hand resting casually in his coat pocket. Nothing moves, but everything waits. He's done this before. Not this exact setup, not this exact hit, but the rhythm is familiar. A meeting that should have happened in a back room now unfolds in a place where machines once hummed louder than human voices. The hit, as it turns out, is a test. It's supposed to be simple, quick. The guy walks in, they talk. Gravano makes the move, but things go off script because the target brings company. Not expected, not authorized. A nephew or a shadow or just someone too dumb to know better. Doesn't matter. Now there are witnesses. Now there's noise. Sammy adapts, fast. He signals Paulie with a glance, barely a blink. Paulie gets it, backs off, redirects the extra guy to the car with a fake phone call. Inside, the tension thickens. The target talks too much, like he suspects something but hopes he's wrong. Gravano listens. He always listens. Until there's nothing left worth hearing. The shot cracks sharp, echoes against rusted girders. A bird flies from a rafter, and the stillness that follows is heavier than the sound itself. Cleanup's quick. No panic. No screaming. Gravano stays behind for the final sweep, and for a moment, just a moment, he stares at the empty spot where the body was, like he's trying to memorize it, file it away in that private cabinet of his brain where he stores all the moments that should haunt him, but don't. Not quite. That warehouse hit, though small in the grand ledger of mafia business, cements Gravano in a new tier. He didn't just follow orders. He managed a complication. He adapted. The family takes notice. Word spreads. Sammy's not just muscle anymore. Many people still think that this job was Gravano's true test, that this is where he proved he could lead. So what do you think? Is the line between leadership and liability really that thin? From here, the work evolves. He's no longer just the guy you call when a problem needs cleaning. Now he's part of the conversation. Construction disputes, union pressure points, political donations that need the right envelopes at the right fundraisers. Sammy's in the loop. And then comes a particularly delicate situation involving a foreman on a city job who's asking too many questions about materials going missing and safety standards being flexible. Gravano doesn't threaten. He invites the guy to lunch, sits across from him at a quiet diner, shares coffee, and tells a story. Not about violence, not directly. About another guy who once asked too many questions. The foreman gets the message. He stops asking. It's psychological warfare now. Gravano doesn't need to swing. He just needs to exist. But this is also where the cracks begin to form. Tiny hairline fractures invisible unless you know where to look. One of his guys, Frankie D, starts drinking too much. Another, Nicky Eyes, talks too loud in bars. And Sammy? He handles it all with that same cold calm. Reassigns jobs, offers warnings without raising his voice. Then comes a night that lingers. A botched collection in Staten Island. One of his younger guys, Joey C, gets sloppy. Pulls a gun on someone who wasn't supposed to be threatened. There's fallout, small, manageable, but noticeable. And Gravano doesn't ignore it. He calls Joey in. No yelling, no table slamming, just 2 chairs, a quiet room, and a long, measured silence. "You want to scare people?" he asks finally. "Try showing up twice. Try doing what you say, on time. You think a gun makes you heavy? A real heavy guy never has to pull one." Joey nods. He gets it, maybe, probably not. Gravano's tone is calm, but inside, he feels the ripple. When the crew starts slipping, even just a little, it means the edges are fraying. And Gravano? He hates fraying edges. Let's anchor this with a real-world detail. In 1980, the New York City construction industry was in flux. Labor disputes were common, and union influence was murky at best. The Gambino family, particularly through players like Gravano, were seizing those cracks, padding contracts, cutting corners, and filling pockets with quiet efficiency. Gravano builds a reputation not just as an enforcer, but as a builder. Literally. He starts pushing into drywall, steel delivery, scaffolding, and bid manipulation. He isn't a gangster who owns a business. He's a businessman who knows how to use fear as insurance. And yet, there's something lonely about this version of Gravano. More meetings, fewer street corners, more dinners with men in suits, fewer laughs with the old crew. He still visits Tato, still checks in with the guys, but his mind is elsewhere. Calculating, managing, climbing. One night, he sits alone at a restaurant table meant for 6. They're late, or maybe not coming. He drinks a little wine, picks at a plate of veal marsala, and listens to a Sinatra song playing too softly in the background. There's a moment, just a flicker, where he remembers his father's workshop. The hiss of steam, the crisp fold of a collar, the smell of pressed wool. It fades quickly. But it's there. Gravano finishes his meal, leaves too big a tip, and walks out without looking back. Because if there's one thing he's learned, it's this. Power rarely walks beside you. It moves ahead. And if you want to hold it, you better learn to walk alone. Gravano remembers the first time he met John Gotti not because of what was said, but because of how little was. Gotti didn't enter a room so much as arrive, like a king without a crown, trailing cologne and calculation. His hair was a slick, perfect monument. His walk said, "You already know who I am." And Sammy? Sammy watched, quiet, measured, listening like always. It was a sit-down at a mutual acquaintance's social club. Just a few chairs, a few cigars, and the low hum of fake laughter. Gotti barely glanced at him at first. But later that night, when the others left and only Gravano lingered, Gotti leaned in and said, "You're the quiet type, huh?" Sammy didn't smile. "Not when I don't need to be." That was enough. From that point on, they started circling each other more frequently. Gotti liked how Gravano handled business. Efficient, discreet, and most importantly, without drawing heat. And Gravano, for all his disdain for flash, couldn't deny the magnetic pull of Gotti's confidence. He was everything Gravano wasn't. Loud, polished, adored by the streets. And yet, they shared a rhythm, an understanding. In time, Gotti would rise. Paul Castellano, then the boss of the Gambino family, had his back turned too long. He favored business suits, white-collar rackets, and a more corporate mafia image. Gotti, on the other hand, thrived on loyalty from the streets. Blue collars, earners, guys like Gravano. By 1985, tensions within the Gambino ranks were boiling. Gotti didn't like Castellano's distance, his arrogance, or the fact that Castellano didn't attend his underboss's funeral, Agnello della Croce, a man Gotti actually respected. That was the final straw. Quiet plans started forming, and here's a moment worth freezing. Many people still think Gravano was brought in early on Gotti's plan to whack Castellano. But so what do you think? Is silence in a room the same as agreement? Does absence from a conspiracy make you clean, or just useful? At first, Sammy wasn't sold on the plan. Killing a boss? That wasn't business. That was revolution. But Gotti framed it differently. He said Castellano had lost the street, had turned the family into a boardroom. "We're earners," Gotti told him. "He's a CEO, and maybe Gravano didn't say yes out loud, but he didn't say no either." The night Paul Castellano was shot in front of Sparks Steakhouse is now Mafia legend. December 16th, 1985. Gotti watched from a car nearby, wearing a coat that probably cost more than most weddings. It was clean, fast, surgical. And suddenly, John Gotti was boss. Gravano wasn't at the steakhouse. He didn't pull a trigger. But when Gotti took the reins, he made sure Gravano was close. Real close. They began spending more time together. Meetings in clubs, car rides through Staten Island, whispers in restaurants that pretended not to notice. Gotti respected his mind, his discipline. "You're not a hothead," he told Sammy once. "You got teeth, but you know when to bite." Gravano took that as a compliment, mostly, and while Gotti dazzled reporters and juries with his designer suits and toothy grin, Sammy handled the empire's foundation: construction rackets, loan-sharking logistics, internal disputes. He didn't need a spotlight. He needed results. And Gotti needed him. Let's drop a factual pin. By 1986, Gravano's reach extended into dozens of legitimate and illegitimate enterprises across New York. He ran multiple crews, controlled millions in contracts, and became the unofficial czar of the Gambino family's construction dominance. And yet, most New Yorkers couldn't pick him out of a lineup. That's the way he liked it. But here's the irony. While Gotti was dubbed the Teflon Don for beating multiple cases, it was Sammy's structure that kept the money flowing and the lie believable. They were a two-headed force, one smiling for the cameras, the other counting in silence. There's a memory Sammy returns to sometimes. Riding shotgun in Gotti's Cadillac, Sinatra playing low, the city lights turning the windshield into a moving constellation. Gotti's talking about the old days, about how things should be, about honor, loyalty, brotherhood. And Sammy thinks to himself, isn't that what we just killed? Still, he says nothing, just nods, listens. Because in the Mafia, agreeing with the boss doesn't always mean believing him. Sometimes it just means surviving him. But that silence, that calculated, strategic silence, starts carrying more weight. Gotti begins calling Sammy his consigliere in private, though technically he's not. Officially, Sammy's still a capo, but his influence? It's seeping through the cracks, saturating decisions from top to bottom. One afternoon, a dispute arises between two crews over a construction site in Queens. Guns are nearly drawn. Sammy walks in, hears both sides, and decides in less than 10 minutes. No raised voice, no threats, just a verdict. And both crews nod, shake hands, and leave. Afterward, one of the guys mutters, "He's more boss than the boss." Sammy hears it, doesn't correct him, but that's how the seeds get planted. Between admiration and envy, between respect and threat. And in a world built on ego, no alliance lasts forever. For now, though, Gravano and Gotti are still a team, a loud boss and a quiet bull, moving through New York like architects of some unspeakable design. Gravano doesn't need headlines. He's building something more durable than fame, something stronger than myth. He's building legacy. The construction business in New York has always been a bit like a card trick, flashy on the surface, but full of hidden fingers and disappearing rules underneath. And by the late 1980s, Sammy Gravano is the magician behind the curtain. Suits replace windbreakers, spreadsheets replace muscle, but make no mistake, every contract still bleeds loyalty. By now, Sammy's control over the city's building trades is no secret to those who matter. If you want to pour concrete in Manhattan, you pay the right man. If you want drywall that gets delivered on time, you make the call. And 9 times out of 10, that call ends with Gravano's quiet voice saying, "I'll handle it." He doesn't just run crews. He runs operations. Several companies on paper, dozens off the books. He figures out the soft math of corruption. Inflate a bid by 15%, skim 10, kickback 5. It's practically elegant. And above all, it's predictable. That's what sets him apart. Gotti is still glowing in tabloid light, dubbed the Dapper Don for his Brioni suits and his courtroom swagger. He flashes smiles like switchblades. But Gravano? He prefers schedules, spreadsheets. He builds a system, not just a persona, and in that system, the cars run on time. Still, Gravano remains careful. He walks job sites like an investor, not a thug. Hard hat, clipboard, maybe a quick word with a foreman. He understands that to really control something, you can't just threaten it. You have to understand it, how it breathes, where it breaks. Let's slip in a historical fact here. During the 1980s, the Mafia controlled Concrete Club, a consortium of mob-linked contractors, won more than $150 million in public construction projects in New York City. And Gravano was the quiet gravity behind many of those wins. But control brings attention, and attention, that brings questions. Sammy starts noticing unmarked vans that linger too long. Men in casual clothes standing just a little too still outside job sites. Phones with that faint static hum. He's not paranoid. He's practiced. He has the crew sweep offices weekly, burns ledgers that don't smell right, and uses cash for anything that touches heat. His meetings grow shorter, sharper. No notes, no names, just eye contact and consequences. Yet, for all the tightening, something looms. It's Gotti. The Don's media persona is swelling faster than the business itself. Court victories, flashing cameras, crowds cheering like it's Yankee Stadium outside a federal courthouse. And Gravano? He watches it all like a man watching a friend walk too close to a cliff while waving to the crowd. "You keep smiling like that," he once tells Gotti, "and they're gonna make your mug the city's wallpaper." Gotti just laughs. "Let 'em look. They can't touch me." That's where they differ. Gravano doesn't believe in invincibility. He believes in margins, in silence, in making sure there's always a back door. And even so, he keeps producing. His crew expands. Now he's overseeing more than construction. He's tied into unions, trucking contracts, no-show jobs. There's a bakery in Brooklyn that hasn't sold bread in 3 years, but somehow clears 15 grand a week. There's a concrete supplier in Jersey with 6 trucks and 1 destination. Influence. And in all this, Gravano never raises his voice. He doesn't need to. The younger guys idolize him. They say he walks like someone who's already figured out how the story ends. When disputes come up, They go to him before they go to the boss. Because Gravano doesn't just deliver orders, he explains the weather behind them. There's a moment, a small one, but it sticks. A kid named Marco messes up a union negotiation, costs the crew a few thousand. He expects to get yelled at, maybe worse. Instead, Gravano calls him into a cafe, buys him an espresso, and says, "So, what did you learn?" Marco mumbles an apology. Sammy shrugs. "That's fine. Just don't make me have the same conversation twice." The kid nods, pale, leaves, never screws up again. Many people still think Gravano ruled through fear. But, so what do you think? Is fear the only reason a man listens? Or is there something quieter that binds a crew tighter? Still, the Gotti problem keeps growing. Behind closed doors, Gotti starts making decisions that don't include him, ordering hits without consensus, trusting the wrong voices, appearing on magazine covers, enjoying being the mafia rather than just running it. And for Gravano, the signs are there. He remembers a story his father used to tell, a parable about a tailor who made suits so fine, kings would wear them. But one day, a king demanded one in red velvet and gold trim, something gaudy and loud. The tailor warned it wouldn't fit right. The king insisted. And when he wore it, people laughed. The suit wasn't bad. It just wasn't true. That's how Gotti starts to look. Tailored, polished, and somehow off. Still, Gravano keeps things moving, because money doesn't pause for ego, and as long as the family earns, things are fine, right? That question begins to whisper louder, especially when Gotti starts hinting that some of Sammy's earnings are too good, that maybe Gravano's growing too powerful. "People talk," he says one night, over drinks. "They say you're running half this family." Sammy looks at his glass. "Only the half that pays the bills." It's a joke, kind of, maybe. Gotti grins, but it's tight. That moment, that's the turn. It doesn't erupt. It settles. A quiet shift in weight. A pause between sentences that last too long. And Gravano? He files it away, because he knows what happens when trust bends too far. He's seen it. He's made it happen. And if Gotti keeps playing the boss in public while making enemies in private, the silence between them won't stay silence forever. It's Christmas Eve, 1988, and the streets of Brooklyn twinkle with a half-hearted kind of cheer. The kind that clings to sagging lights on storefronts, and the scent of overboiled clams wafting from third-story windows. Families crowd around crowded tables. Songs play. Glasses clink. But not everyone is home tonight. Gravano is standing in a driveway in Staten Island, not dressed for holiday photos. His coat is heavy. His breath curls into the cold, and the silence is thick enough to taste. A man named Louis de Bono, a Gambino soldier who's been veering too far from the script, has become a problem, and Gotti wants it handled. But it's not supposed to be tonight, not Christmas. That's the unspoken rule. Even among killers, there are certain lines. Holidays are for family, not for blood. Yet here they are. The plan is simple. Louis is supposed to meet Sammy for a quiet talk. One of those, let's straighten things out conversations that rarely ends with straightening. But de Bono doesn't show. He delays, reschedules, dodges. That, in itself, is a message. Sammy doesn't chase. He waits. Not because he's merciful, but because he's calculating. You don't kill a man on Christmas if you don't have to. It doesn't play well. It rattles the crew. It makes tradition flinch. Still, the night hangs heavy. He ends up spending part of it at a diner, alone. Coffee goes cold. A waitress in a reindeer headband asks if he wants pie. He declines. The jukebox plays something soft and sad, and in that moment, the life he's built feels hollow. Structured, yes. Successful, yes. But joyful, not even close. He thinks of his daughter, Karen. Thinks of her fingers on the piano keys, her laugh. Thinks of his wife, Deborah, wrapping presents without him again. The life at home feels like something preserved in amber, untouched, but slowly decaying. Later that night, he takes a slow walk down the block where he used to live, just to see it. The porch light's still crooked. The same dog barks behind the same fence, and for one quiet second, he considers walking up, ringing the bell, and saying nothing, just standing there, existing in two lives at once. But he doesn't. He turns, walks back to the car, and drives off. Gambino will get his due, just not tonight. Let's fold in some fact. Louis Gambino would eventually be killed in 1990 in the parking garage of the World Trade Center. And yes, Gravano was part of the decision. The reason? Gambino ignored a direct order to attend a sit-down. In mob terms, that's not a scheduling conflict. That's a declaration. But here in 1988, it's just another seed planted. Another loyalty gone soft. Another reminder that even in a world of vows and blood oaths, trust has an expiration date. Gravano returns to work the day after Christmas, like nothing happened. The construction rackets are still humming. A union guy is asking for a bonus that wasn't approved. Someone lost track of a truckload of copper wire. Nothing stops moving just because it's the season. He meets with Gotti later that week. They sit in the back of a restaurant that used to be loud but has learned how to hush when certain people walk in. "You take care of Gambino?" Gotti asks, casual. "Soon," Sammy says. Gotti smiles. "Christmas spirit?" Sammy nods once. "For now." And that's enough. But something about the exchange doesn't sit right. It's not the job. It's the tone. The way Gotti smiles when he says it. Like he's testing. Like he's watching how Gravano carries mercy, just to see if it slows him down. Many people still think that Gambino's delay was less about disrespect and more about fear. He knew what was coming. So what do you think? Can a man outmaneuver a fate he earned himself? Or does hesitating just tighten the noose? Back at the office, Sammy buries himself in numbers. He's got a new contract coming through in Midtown, and he's watching bids roll in like waves. He adjusts the percentages, moves crews around, makes sure the right palms are greased. But he keeps thinking about that night in the diner, about the pie he didn't eat, the piano he didn't hear, the porch light he didn't approach, and he wonders, not for the first time, what life would have been like if he'd listened to his father, if he'd stayed behind the counter, if he'd pressed suits instead of pressing triggers. Then he looks at the ledger, sees the figures, the empire, and he reminds himself, there's no such thing as a clean getaway, only different versions of dirty survival. He still hasn't told his wife about the Gambino order, or about how close it came to happening on Christmas Eve. She doesn't ask, and he doesn't offer. They've made peace with the gaps in their conversations, like drywall patched over cracks you don't want to see anymore. Later, when he finally tucks into bed, he hears carolers faintly in the distance. Off-key, brave, maybe a little drunk. They're singing something about peace on earth. Sammy rolls over, closes his eyes. He's got another meeting in the morning. If the mob were a symphony, wiretaps would be the moments the violins screeched. By the end of the 1980s, the FBI isn't just listening. They're listening well. They've moved past crude bugs taped under tables. Now they're planting devices in lamps, coat hangers, even smoke detectors. And one place in particular becomes the orchestra pit, the apartment above the Ravenite Social Club. That club is Gotti's favorite stage. He holds court there like a talk show host, leaning back in leather, surrounded by nods and half laughs, cracking jokes about bodies with the same charm used to order steak. Sammy always hated the place. Too public, too performative. But he goes. Because that's what you do when the boss invites you. What none of them know, at first, is that the feds are already inside, listening, recording, cataloging every dropped name and veiled threat. Gravano's voice, calm and measured, is on dozens of tapes. But it's not his voice that turns heads. It's Gotti's. Because Gotti talks too much. He brags, he mocks, he replays hits like bedtime stories. And worst of all, he talks about Sammy. Not with reverence, not with trust, but with distance. There's too much heat around him, Gotti says on one tape. He's making too much. Thinks he's got the keys to the city. Sammy hears this later, much later, when a prosecutor plays it back for him in a sterile room lit by bad coffee and worse fluorescent lights. But even now, even before he knows exactly what Gotti has said, he senses something's off. One day, after a meeting at the Rabbinite, Gravano rides with Frank Locascio, another top lieutenant. The windows are cracked. The air is stale. You ever feel like he's got a lot to say when we're not in the room? Frank mutters. Sammy just nods. Feels like he's narrating a movie we're not invited to watch. Many people still think that Gravano turned on Gotti solely to save himself. But so what do you think? When the man you built an empire with begins planning it without you, what's left to be loyal to? The irony isn't lost on Sammy. He's always preached discretion, always advised younger guys to let others speak, to stay behind the curtain. Now, it's the spotlight that's killing them. Back in his own circle, Gravano starts tightening things. He pulls back from public meetings, cuts down on his club appearances. Even his construction visits become rare. He starts using middlemen for routine jobs, keeps his name off more paperwork, switches cars more often. His instincts sharpen. Still, the problem is growing. The FBI gets bolder. Their surveillance logbooks swell. They now have enough conversations recorded to build a narrative, brick by incriminating brick. And Gotti? He keeps giving them more. One afternoon, after a meeting in the club's back room, Gotti leans over to Gravano and says, "They can't touch us. They've been trying for years." Gravano doesn't answer right away. Just lights a cigarette, watches the tip glow like the last flare before nightfall. "They don't have to touch us," he finally says. "They just have to watch us long enough." He's not wrong. Eventually, the indictments come. Multiple charges, racketeering, murder, conspiracy. The whole Gambino top tier is rounded up in one neat bundle, like a Christmas gift wrapped in subpoenas. The government isn't just coming for blood. They're coming for storylines. And they've already written the script. Gotti as the flashy villain, Gravano as the cold-blooded deputy, the rest as disposable supporting cast. They're housed together at the MCC, Metropolitan Correctional Center in Manhattan. Different floors, but the same cage. Sammy notices how Gotti handles jail like he's hosting a very inconvenient dinner party. Smiles, jokes, keeps the myth alive. But Sammy? He goes quiet. He watches. He reads every court document, every motion, every line of indictment. And slowly, like ice cracking across a lake, he realizes what's happening. Gotti's defense team is building a strategy, and it hinges on Sammy. They're going to blame him. Not directly, of course. No finger-pointing. But they're painting Gravano as the rogue, the violent one, the reckless earner, the one who acted without approval. In other words, the fall guy. There's a specific moment, bleak, sharp, when this becomes undeniable. Sammy receives a transcript from his attorney. In it, Gotti says, "Sammy's killed too many people. He's out of control." Sammy stares at that line for a long time. Too many people. He doesn't deny it. But coming from Gotti, the man who gave those orders, that's not just betrayal, that's strategy. And here's the tragic detail. Sammy would have taken the fall for the family, for the cause, but not like this. Not to shield a man who used him like armor and then tossed him to the wolves the minute it got cold. Back in his cell, he doesn't sleep much, just paces, thinks about the warehouse, about the Christmas Eve that almost became a murder, about the time Gotti made a joke that felt like a warning, about every moment that loyalty felt one-sided. One night, under the buzzing hum of a fluorescent bulb, he mutters to himself, "He wrote the play. Now he wants me to take the final bow." The walls of the Metropolitan Correctional Center don't echo. They absorb. Inside, time isn't marked by clocks, but by footsteps, metal clicks, and the slow drip of trust dissolving in silence. Sammy Gravano has never been much for talking. But now silence starts to feel like someone else's game. The trial is approaching. The FBI's case is thick, layered, almost theatrical. And in the middle of that script, someone has to be the villain with the dirtiest hands. Gotti's team wants that someone to be Sammy. They start seeding it quietly. Motions filed, defense theories whispered, little press leaks. Nothing official, just enough to frame a narrative. Gravano acted on his own, they imply. He was unmanageable, a renegade, a man so consumed by his own empire that not even the boss could rein him in. Gravano reads every word, absorbs every dodge, and then comes the sit-down. A meeting is arranged, under tight supervision, in a holding room designed more for lawyers than legends. Sammy walks in, cuffed, jaw tight. Gotti's already seated. Immaculate even in federal khaki, he looks up with a smile that doesn't reach his eyes. They talk, or rather Gotti talks. "You know this trial's all smoke," he says. "They got nothing. They're bluffing. We just keep quiet and we walk out like kings." Sammy listens. "Your name's in a few places," Gotti adds. "You know how these feds twist things." There it is. Sammy leans forward, not hostile, just deliberate. They twist what they hear, not what they imagine. Gotti waves it off. "Come on, they need a villain. Let them try." Many people still think this conversation was a turning point. The moment Gravano realized the only loyalty left in the room was his own. So what do you think? If your partner starts rehearsing the speech that throws you under the bus, do you sit in the passenger seat or get out? Gravano doesn't reply that day. Not directly. He walks back to his cell, hands clenched, pacing slower than usual. That night, he doesn't sleep, doesn't eat, just stares at the cement wall until it feels like it's staring back. 2 days later, his lawyer brings news. The government wants to talk, not just about testimony, about cooperation. Gravano doesn't say no. He doesn't say yes either. He asks for a meeting. Quiet, no lawyers, just information. He's taken to a federal interview room with 2 agents and a prosecutor. They're prepared. Notes, photos, files, transcripts. But Sammy? He brings nothing. Just memory. They ask about a job from '85. He corrects the date. Says it was '84, and the guy's name was actually Vincent, not Victor. They blink. Impressed. The room gets quieter. He doesn't raise his voice. Just tells the truth, his truth. The kind that smells like back alleys and unregistered guns. The kind that rearranges timelines. He leaves the meeting without commitment, but something inside shifts. He's tired. Not just of prison, but of pretending that loyalty still means what it once did. That word has lost its shape. It's become a costume people put on for meetings and shed in courtrooms, so he goes back, not to Gotti, but to the agents. This time he agrees, and that decision, quiet as it may be, is seismic. The highest-ranking member of the Gambino family has flipped. Gravano becomes the government's star witness, the man who knows where every body is buried, figuratively and literally. The man who once moved in silence is now narrating the fall of the empire he helped build. There's a moment, strange, almost cinematic, when one of the agents, after another day of testimony prep, looks at him and says, "You ever think you'd end up on this side of the table?" Gravano smirks. "I didn't think I'd live long enough to have sides. Let's set a clear historical peg." Sammy Gravano's cooperation with the federal government in 1991 led to the conviction of John Gotti and dozens of others. His testimony included details of 19 murders. He became the most significant mafia defector since Joe Valachi, and the first underboss of a major crime family to testify. He doesn't feel like a hero. He doesn't feel like a traitor either. He feels done. And yet, even as he speaks, before juries, in sterile courtrooms where the walls feel like padded microphones, there's a detachment in his voice. He's not gloating. He's not remorseful. He's just telling the truth as he knows it, like someone reciting the weather forecast for a storm that already hit. One afternoon, he takes a break in a windowless hallway, drinking bad coffee from a foam cup. A young agent stands nearby, watching him. "You nervous?" the agent asks. Gravano shrugs. "I've been shot at, watched friends die, built an empire from a phone booth. Nervous isn't the word." And in that moment, it's clear. Gravano didn't switch sides to save himself. He switched because the side he was on had already disappeared, smiling all the while, into a tape recorder hidden in a lamp. Testifying isn't what Hollywood says it is. There's no dramatic spotlight, no gasps from the jury, no climactic strings in the background. For Sammy Gravano, it feels more like bookkeeping, ugly, necessary, and quietly permanent. The courtroom is cold, polished, and too bright. Everyone wears their masks, lawyers as warriors, jurors as blank slates, defendants as dignified. But Gravano, he just walks in wearing the truth like a coat he can't take off anymore. He steps up, places his hand on the Bible, swears to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but. And then, calmly, he begins to dismantle the family he once helped build. Names, dates, motives, techniques. He doesn't dramatize. He remembers. He speaks like a man reading from blueprints, not confessing sins. When asked who ordered the hit on Louis de Bono, he says it flatly, John Gotti. When asked who carried it out, me. Each answer lands with the thud of a falling domino. The courtroom watches, not in shock, because by now the legend has cracks, but in a kind of stunned stillness. Here's the man who sat beside Gotti for years, now pointing across the room with words, not fingers. And Gotti? He sits stone-faced, flanked by lawyers, trying not to flinch. But his eyes betray something else, like he's watching a ship sink and realizing the lifeboats are gone. Sammy explains how the Gambino family operated like a corporation, how contracts were manipulated, how union heads were bought, how murders were planned with the same precision as a construction bid. He recounts the Castellano hit, the bodies dropped over petty disrespect, and the times when Gotti spoke too loudly, laughed too easily, thought he was smarter than the feds with their wires and folders. And yes, he talks about his own crimes. "I was involved in 19 murders," he says, no hesitation. Some jurors stiffen, others glance at each other, but Gravano doesn't flinch, because in his world, numbers aren't sins. They're statistics. Many people still think Gravano used the stand to reinvent himself, to clean up his image. So what do you think? Can a man who buried bodies also dig up truth? Or is it just the same shovel doing different work? In private, the prosecutors treat him like a prized machine, valuable, efficient, but not trusted. One even jokes, "You'd make a hell of a lecturer at the FBI Academy." Sammy smirks. "I'd rather teach carpentry." And yet, behind that mask of calm, there are frays. He dreams more often now, badly. In one, he's back in the Ravenite, but everyone's gone, and the chairs are facing the walls. In another, he's at his daughter's piano recital, but every time she plays a note, it's the sound of a gunshot. He wakes in his cell, sheets twisted, sweat cold. The room is always too quiet. One day, during a lunch break from court, he sees a familiar face in the hallway. It's Frank Locascio, the consigliere. Shackled, guarded, but somehow dignified. They exchange a look. Frank shakes his head slightly. Not with anger, not with pity, just disappointment. And that hurts more than he expected. But it doesn't stop him, because this isn't about pride anymore. It's about clarity, and Gravano's voice becomes a scalpel, cutting cleanly through the flesh of decades of corruption. Every story he tells reveals not just the crimes, but the system that allowed them, the city that fed on silence, the unions that turned blind eyes, the judges that played tennis with gangsters on Sundays. It isn't redemption, it's reconstruction. Let's lock in the fact. Gravano's testimony, over the course of multiple trials, leads to the conviction of Gotti and more than 30 other mob figures. It's not just the fall of one man, it's the collapse of a dynasty. But victories come with shadows. Outside the courtroom, the press has a field day. Underboss unloads. Mob turncoat breaks code. The bull speaks. Gravano becomes both hero and pariah, depending on who's writing the headline. He doesn't read the papers. Instead, he spends his evenings in holding, staring at the same beige walls, wondering what's left. One night, a guard passes his cell and says, "Never thought I'd see the day you'd be on this side." Gravano leans back, sighs. "Neither did I. But here we are," he adds. "Here we are." The verdict for Gotti comes in swiftly. Guilty on all counts. Life in prison without parole. No more designer suits. No more camera flashes. Just iron bars and time. Gravano watches the news report through a plexiglass screen. Gotti's photo fades from the screen, replaced by courtroom sketches. Sammy stares for a while, then turns away. Because the story isn't about what was lost, it's about what's left behind. And for Gravano, that's not freedom, it's distance. Witness protection is less like vanishing and more like being reborn in a mirror that lies. For Sammy Gravano, the government's offer isn't just safety, it's severance. From name, from past, from the codes he once killed, to honor. He trades Gravano for Giovanni, trades Staten Island for the suburbs, trades infamy for a slow fade into the beige. His relocation is unremarkable by design. A mid-sized town in the southwest, Arizona, maybe, or Nevada. Enough dust to dull the edges, enough strip malls to hide in. They give him a fake job, a fake ID, even a fake dentist. But nothing about it feels real. Not the apartment, not the neighbors, not even the eggs he scrambles in the mornings, trying to convince himself he's just another early riser. There's no ceremony to it. No congratulations. No medal for tearing down an empire. Just a silence so deep it echoes in the corners of his rental kitchen. He misses things he never thought he would. The weight of a good coat. The smell of street meat on a cold Manhattan night. the comfort of a familiar nod from a man who could end you, but didn't. There's nothing in suburbia that even resembles danger, and that, somehow, makes him feel less alive. They tell him to lay low, to adjust, to blend. He's good at those things. He always has been. But blending now feels like erasing, like he's slowly sanding himself down to something unrecognizable. Still, he goes through the motions. He joins a gym, buys new sneakers. He picks up dry cleaning under a name that still tastes fake every time it passes his lips. And yet, for all the change, some habits stay. He still sits with his back to the wall, still memorizes exit routes in every room, still watches for men who don't belong. Though now it's more likely to be a bored insurance adjuster than a Lucchese tale. One afternoon, he visits a hardware store, just to browse. A clerk asks if he's looking for anything in particular. Gravano smiles, almost warmly. "Nothing I can buy here," he says. "Let's drop a real-world pin. The Federal Witness Protection Program, or WITSEC, has relocated over 8,600 witnesses since its inception. The vast majority never reoffend. But Gravano? He's already a statistical outlier, because even here in this desert mirage of safety, something inside him resists stillness. He writes, a little. Memories, names, scenarios. Not for anyone else. Just to remember who he was before the silence swallowed him. He's not nostalgic. He's just trying to stay whole. The FBI checks in regularly. A phone call, a doorstep knock, a voice reminding him to stay off the grid. Don't contact old friends. Don't revisit old habits. Don't, above all else, be interesting. But Gravano has never been good at uninteresting. He watches the news, sees his own name fade from headlines. Gotti's death in 2002, cancer behind bars, comes and goes. A whisper compared to the thunder they used to be. And still, no peace. Because peace for Gravano isn't in hiding. It was in purpose, in managing crews, in counting envelopes, in deciding fates with a sentence and a stare. Here, in this soft new life, even the coffee tastes like an apology. One evening, he sits on a plastic patio chair, looking out over a strip of gravel that passes for a backyard. The sun sets slow in the west, painting the sky with cheap watercolors. A neighbor's sprinkler hisses, and Sammy wonders if anyone else has ever been this present while feeling so gone. Many people still think witness protection is a reward. So what do you think? Is erasing your past the same as starting over, or just a slower kind of punishment? He gets a call from his daughter, Karen, voice crackling through the lines. They talk lightly, tiptoeing around the history. She says she's writing a book. He says, "Just tell it straight." There's a pause. Then she says, "What's straight in a story like ours?" He doesn't answer. He just nods, alone. Later, he lies in bed and stares at the ceiling. He pictures New York, not as it is, but as it feels. Heavy, electric, familiar. He wonders what the city would say to him now. If the sidewalks would recognize his steps. If the ghosts would nod in passing. He drifts off sometime after midnight. Not dreaming. Not remembering. Just floating in that strange middle space between anonymity and aftershock. It's the silence that finally gets to him. Not the quiet of peace, but the kind that rusts things from the inside out. The kind that settles in after you've told your last story, and there's no one left to correct you. No one left to doubt you. For Sammy Gravano, life in the program has become a limbo, where even the air feels rehearsed. The government has done its job. He's safe, technically. But Gravano has never been just a man. He was a name, a pulse in the city's underground rhythm. Now he's a man with no place to cast a shadow, and yet the world keeps nudging him. A man at the gym recognizes his voice, not his face, but his voice. Asks, "Hey, you ever do time in New York?" Gravano shrugs. "I've passed through." But it rattles him. The next day he changes gyms. Another time, he spots a familiar haircut 2 aisles over in a grocery store. Sharp, square, too Brooklyn for Arizona. Probably nothing. But he leaves his cart. Walks straight out. It's not paranoia. It's instinct. A reflex sharpened by decades of survival that doesn't know how to retire. The program tries to relocate him again. He says no. What's the point? You can keep moving a ghost, but it doesn't bring it back to life. Eventually, Gravano stops pretending. He tells the feds he wants out. Officially. No more handlers. No more check-ins. He'll take his chances. They protest. Cite risk, retaliation, old enemies. He nods. Let him try. Because here's the thing. Gravano doesn't fear dying. He fears disappearing without meaning. If the end comes, he'd rather meet it standing on his own name. He moves again. On his own this time. Phoenix. A modest house. Neutral paint. Desert air thick with distance. And here, in this dust-colored exile, something shifts. He starts talking. Not to the feds. Not to old friends. To the public. Interviews, writings, eventually videos. There's a hunger to his voice. Not for fame, but for control. The narrative had slipped from his hands for years. Now he takes it back, one anecdote at a time. About Gotti, about the hits, about the rules he broke, and the ones he still can't admit to himself. It becomes something between confession and performance. Let's root this with a fact. In 1997, Gravano broke his deal with the government by re-engaging in criminal activity, running an ecstasy ring with his son. He was arrested, pleaded guilty, and sentenced to 20 years in prison. He was released in 2017. So yes, even after all that, the silence didn't hold. Why? Because Gravano was never built for invisibility. He was made of steel and ritual and sharp decisions. He didn't know how to sit still without orchestrating something, even if it was chaos. Many people still think Gravano's post-cooperation crimes were proof that he never really changed. So, what do you think? Is a man who lived in violence ever meant to retire? Or does the itch to move, to scheme, to control always find its way back? Back in Phoenix, post-prison again, older now, Gravano doesn't run crews. Doesn't make collections. He records stories. He sits in a simple room. Camera in front of him. Microphone clipped to a clean collar. The tone is calm. The sentences are direct. The weight is real. "I'm not proud of what I did," he says in one clip. "But I'm not gonna lie about it either." And the audience, surprisingly, is wide. True crime fans. Curious strangers. Even former enemies who watch with clenched jaws and silent nods. He becomes something strange in mafia mythology, a narrator, and oddly, he's good at it. Not theatrical like Gotti, not evasive like the old-timers. He's blunt, reflective, almost tired. One evening, after filming a segment, he steps outside as the sky fades into its usual watercolor dusk. The desert doesn't hum like New York. It just waits. A neighbor walks by with a dog, waves politely. Doesn't recognize him. Sammy waves back. No threat, no memory. Just a moment, simple and unburdened. And yet, in his pocket, his hand instinctively closes around the keys. Tight. Like he's still bracing for something. Not fear, not regret, just readiness. Because the quiet may surround him now. But he knows better than anyone. Silence doesn't mean peace. Sometimes it just means pause. Morning in Phoenix begins without ceremony. A pale orange sun rises behind stucco rooftops and plastic lawn flamingos, casting long shadows across cracked sidewalks and cactus beds. Sammy Gravano wakes before the heat, the same way he used to wake before hits or meetings or money drops. Early, alert, already thinking. He makes eggs. Plain, no salt. Toast, dry. A little black coffee in a chipped mug. The house is quiet except for the gentle hum of an old ceiling fan that seems to understand discretion. He's 76 now. The reflection in the kitchen window is leaner, looser. Gravity's been busy, but there's still something sharp behind the eyes. Like the blades dulled, not broken. He eats standing up. Just like in the old days, because sitting for too long invites thought, and thought tends to circle back to names, to nights, to noises that don't stop when the room goes still. Today is different. Today he's already decided. The eggs are barely finished when he picks up the burner phone and dials a number written on the back of a takeout menu. No contacts saved, just muscle memory. It rings once, twice. Then a voice, soft, female, cautious. Yeah? It's me. A pause. Okay. Another pause. I figured. They agree to meet. Nothing dramatic, just a park. Midday, plenty of sun and space. The kind of neutral ground where ghosts can stretch without echoing too loud. It's his daughter, Karen. He hasn't seen her in nearly a decade. The meeting is neither warm nor cold. It simply is. She wears sunglasses and a denim jacket, even though it's pushing 90 degrees. He notices that. She sits with her arms folded, body turned slightly away. But she doesn't leave. They talk. At first, it's about groceries, her kids' school, a cracked phone screen. Then, slowly, it drifts. He tells her he's been thinking a lot. She says, "Yeah, me too." There's a moment when he reaches for his coffee and accidentally brushes her hand. She doesn't flinch, but she doesn't linger either, and that's enough. There's no apology. Not really. No words that would fit. Just an understanding between two people who share the same last name, but not the same history. As they part, she says, "I don't know what I want from you." He nods. "That's okay. I don't know what I'm offering." Later that evening, he returns home and sits on the back patio. The sun has dipped, but the heat lingers, pressed low into the cement like old guilt. The fan inside continues its soft rotation. He closes his eyes, tries to sleep, but sleep for Gravano is always half-finished business. Every breath is a window rattling open somewhere else, so he lays there half-dreaming. He sees a dim hallway, a man waiting on the other side of a door that never opens. He sees his father's tailoring shears open on a workbench. He hears the faint echo of piano keys, notes played wrong, then right, then wrong again. And then stillness, not the kind that follows a shot, not the kind that comes after running. A different kind, a gentle, heavy quiet that spreads across his chest and drips down through the floorboards. His hands unclench. His jaw softens. His breath steadies. Not because he's at peace, but because there's nothing left to resist. This is the wind down. No sharp edges now, only soft ones. No names in his head. No footsteps in the hall. Just the hum of the fan and the ache of memories that have finally grown too tired to haunt him. Maybe this is what rest looks like. Not sleep, but surrender. Not forgiveness, but forgetting. And for a moment, just long enough to notice, Sammy Gravano sleeps without armor. When Sammy Gravano opens his eyes the next morning, there's no fanfare, no angels, no headlines, just another sunrise bleeding through dusty blinds and the faint taste of old coffee in his mouth. But something is different. Not outside. Out there, it's still Phoenix, still beige and unbothered. the difference is internal, almost imperceptible. Like a room has been emptied in his chest. He gets up slowly. His knees creak now. His back doesn't forgive like it used to, but he moves without urgency, without the old edge of someone always half bracing for a knock on the door. He makes breakfast, again with the eggs, again standing. The habit lingers, but today, the act feels smaller, not meaningless, but quiet. It's just fuel now. No meetings, no payoffs, no whispered updates from guys with chain wallets and too much cologne. Just Tuesday. But routine is a strange thing. It creeps in even when you pretend not to need it. Gravano still checks the blinds, still counts the passing cars, still keeps a firearm, registered this time, in the drawer by the sink. Just in case. Because the past, no matter how far behind you drive, always leaves landmarks. Later in the day, he visits a strip mall barber, one of those places where the chairs squeak and the TVs play news nobody listens to. He doesn't need a haircut. He just wants to hear people speak, to sit somewhere with noise and no consequence. The barber doesn't recognize him. That's always a small relief, even now. They talk about the heat, about how everything's getting more expensive, about how nobody tips anymore. I tip, Sammy says, and he does. $20 on a $15 trim. It's not generosity. It's remembrance. A nod to all the times he demanded loyalty and paid in folded bills. On the way home, he stops at a corner gas station, buys a soda, watches as a teenager behind the counter stares at their phone and mumbles the total without looking up. He remembers a time when you looked everyone in the eye, when not looking meant weakness or guilt or worse. But this world, it doesn't run on respect. It runs on distraction. He drinks the soda outside, leaning against his car, watching nothing in particular, just letting the sun do its job. And while he stands there, something odd happens. A man pulls into the next space, middle-aged, baseball cap, gets out, glances at Sammy twice. The second look lingers. Gravano meets it with a neutral expression. The man hesitates, then says, "You that guy from YouTube?" Sammy blinks. "Maybe. I've seen your stuff. Wild stories. Mafia, right?" Sammy shrugs. "Just life." The man grins, then nods slowly. "You ever get scared someone's gonna come for you?" Another shrug. "I've met worse people than the ones watching." The guy laughs. "Fair enough." And then he leaves. Just like that. But it sticks with Sammy on the drive home. The idea that his story, the one he tried so hard to bury, is now something casual enough to scroll past. That decades of blood, secrets, betrayals have become late-night content for strangers with earbuds. He doesn't know whether to be offended or relieved. Many people still think storytelling saved Sammy Gravano's life in the end. So what do you think? Can turning your sins into stories give them weight, or just help them float away? Back home, he opens his laptop. The screen glows with thumbnails of his own face. Titles like, "The Real Reason Gotti Turned on Me," or "What No One Tells You About Murder Number 8. It's surreal, but also somehow grounding. He presses play on one. His own voice begins. Flat, deliberate. You want to know what loyalty sounds like? It's quiet. It never asks for applause. But when it's gone, the silence changes shape. He watches for a moment, then closes the lid. Too much reflection makes the walls feel closer. Instead, he grabs his keys. No plan, just the road. He drives through Phoenix like a ghost in his own afterlife, past gas stations, vape shops, chain restaurants that all feel like placebos for something cities used to have. Character. He ends up near the edge of the desert, where the buildings thin out and the land stretches, open and unforgiving. He pulls over, steps out, and there it is, silence. Not protection, not punishment, just the real kind. No sirens, no engine hum, No whispered names behind his back, just wind, just earth. Just a man who's told enough stories to know which ones still belong to him and which ones never did. The motel is just outside Phoenix, one of those half-forgotten places where the curtains never quite close and the air conditioner hums like a confession. Sammy Gravano checks in without a reservation, under a name that doesn't matter, with a wallet full of small bills that still somehow feel like stolen currency. He doesn't need to be here. He's not hiding, not exactly, but sometimes old habits win. He picks the corner room on the second floor. Easier to surveil from above. One staircase, 2 exits. He tosses his small duffel on the bed, unpacks nothing, and pulls a chair near the window. The ice bucket remains untouched. The TV stays off. His world has never needed distraction. It needs containment. This room isn't for sleep, it's for thinking. He's been turning over something for weeks now. Something just beneath the surface. It started small. A gut whisper. But lately, it's grown louder. Someone's watching him, not in the way fans do. Not the "I saw you on YouTube" kind. This is different, subtler. There was the car that lingered too long across from his street 2 nights ago. The man who ordered coffee and left without taking a sip. The package on his doorstep. No return label, no sender. Just the word Sal printed in pencil. It could be coincidence, could be paranoia. But for a man like Sammy Gravano, coincidence is a courtesy he no longer accepts. So he checks in, waits, watches. He sleeps with one shoe on, and the light in the bathroom turned to low. He eats vending machine pretzels and drinks canned soda. Not because he's afraid, but because being ready is the only part of himself he still trusts. On the 3rd night at 2:13 a.m., there's a knock. 3 taps. Too soft for hotel staff. Too exact for a drunk guest. He doesn't answer, just slides the .38 from under the pillow and holds it loosely across his lap, like a conversation piece. The knock doesn't repeat. Eventually, he hears footsteps recede. A car door. Then the slow pull of tires over gravel. The next morning, he checks out. Says nothing to the girl behind the counter who barely looks up from her phone. Back in his car, he drives aimlessly through town, the morning sun turning windshields to mirrors. And in each one, for a moment, he sees himself. Not as he is now, but as he was. 20 years ago. Sharp suit, slower breath, quicker to judge, slower to regret. Many people still think witness protection ended the story. But so what do you think? If the past was only paused, never buried, what happens when it knocks again? Gravano finds himself parked outside a gym. Not one he goes to, not one he should be near, but he knows the man who owns it. An old acquaintance. Small time. Once connected to a soldier who owed Sammy favors back in '89. Word on the street is, he's talking to the wrong people now, whispering stories he doesn't own, mentioning names he never earned the right to say. Sammy doesn't get out of the car, he just watches, times the comings and goings, takes note of license plates, builds a rhythm in his head like the old days. Because information has always been his first language. He doesn't want violence, but he doesn't rule it out. He returns home that evening, opens the door slowly, checks the windows, the corners, sits down at his kitchen table, across from a spiral notebook he's been scribbling in for months. It's filled with fragments, names, doodles, sentences that might be chapters or might be confessions. At the top of a fresh page, he writes, "The weight of survival is heavier than the weight of sin." He stares at it for a while, then closes the book. Not because it's finished, because some things don't need to be written. They just need to be understood. That night he doesn't sleep at all. He just sits in the dark, breathing with purpose, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. It sounds like someone clearing their throat, like something's about to begin, or maybe return. Sammy Gravano never feared mirrors, only what they forgot to reflect. In the motel, in his home, in every cheap diner bathroom and gas station stall, his reflection stayed loyal to the man he could still explain. Jaw set, eyes wary, hands never quite still. But this morning, standing in front of the mirror over his chipped kitchen sink, he sees something else. Not fear, not regret, just pause, like the moment right before a storm hits, when the trees stiffen and the birds disappear. He buttons his shirt slowly, collar crisp. It's a habit he never lost. Presentation. No gold chains now, no pinky rings or double-breasted suits. But he still wears himself like armor. The trim, the calm, the space he takes up in a room. He's got a meeting, not a mob meeting, not anymore. This one's with the feds, not as a protected witness, not as a snitch, as something else. They'd reached out again a few weeks back, an agent named Russo, young but smart, offering him a different kind of role. Consultation, strategy, insight into modern criminal structuring, they'd said. He almost laughed. You want me to guest lecture? Russo shrugged. You've already done more teaching than most professors, just with a bigger body count. Gravano didn't agree right away. But he didn't say no, because part of him misses the feeling of moving pieces, of reading a room, of knowing something no one else in it understands. So today, he walks into a modest downtown office building under a name badge that simply reads, S. Gravano, Consultant. There's coffee, a table, a dry erase board already scribbled with arrows and buzzwords. A half-dozen agents greet him with curious eyes and polite caution. He nods, says little, then begins. You're thinking about gangs like they're machines. They're not. They're ecosystems. You don't shut them down. You poison the trust that feeds them. They write that down. One asks, how did your crew communicate without phones? Sammy smiles. By knowing when not to. Many people still think Sammy Gravano should have faded quietly, lived his final years in silence. So what do you think? Is legacy a thing you choose? Or a thing that insists on being shaped even after you've tried to bury it? After the session, one of the younger agents follows him to the elevator. You ever think of writing all this down? I think about a lot of things. Why not publish something real, straight from you? Sammy steps into the elevator, presses the button, and says over his shoulder, because what's real for me would get most people killed. The doors close. Later, he returns home to a call waiting on his burner. No message, just a missed call from a private number, the same one that's called 3 times in 2 weeks. He doesn't answer, not because he's afraid, but because he already knows whoever it is doesn't need him to pick up. They're just letting him know. They're still there. That night, he finds himself restless. He opens the notebook again. Pages of ink, scribbles, names scratched out and rewritten. At the bottom of one page, written small and neat, a voice is a weapon if you use it right. He considers it, then flips the page. On the next one, he starts writing something new, not about hits, not about heists, about what came after, about the gray zone, the years between the past and the present, between who he was and who he's still figuring out how to be. He writes for an hour, maybe more. Then, just before sleep, he makes a call, not to his daughter, not to the feds, to himself. He records a voice memo, just a few sentences. If I don't wake up tomorrow, I want someone to know. I remembered everything, not for revenge, not for remorse, just because forgetting never suited me. He saves it, folders it away, then lies down in bed, alone again, but not unfinished, because even now, long after the family fell, long after loyalty was traded for freedom, something inside Sammy Gravano keeps trying to build. Not an empire, not forgiveness, but understanding. And that might be the last racket worth running. The desert has a way of wearing things down without making a sound. Cars, bones, memories. Everything softens under sun and time. Even a man like Sammy Gravano. He walks each morning now. Not far, just around the block. Enough to keep the joints moving, to remind his legs that they once ran with purpose. Neighbors nod. A few wave. Most don't know who he is. Some do, but pretend not to. He doesn't mind either way. He's not here to be seen. He's here to last. He brings no phone on these walks. No weapon either. That's new. Not because he feels safe, exactly, but because at some point, you get tired of carrying the past on both hips. He's begun to notice details again. Birds nesting under eaves, the way grocery store lights flicker when the AC kicks in, the sharp silence just before the sprinklers begin. That kind of stillness used to make him reach for something. A cigarette, a bottle, a trigger. Now, he just breathes it in. But the calm is never clean. A letter arrives. No return address. Just his name, his real name, written in the handwriting of someone who knew him before the noise. Inside, a single sheet. It says, "You think they've all forgotten. Some of us remember too well." No signature. He burns it, not in fear, in ritual. He's done answering ghosts. Still, that night he doesn't sleep. He sits at the edge of his bed, staring at the darkness like it owes him something. He remembers the safe house in Staten Island, the smell of mildew and warm beer. He remembers the sound of his boots on courthouse marble. He remembers every name, names the world has forgotten, but that still live in the hollow of his ribs. Johnny, Mikey, Polly, Richie, Dom, Frankie, Louie. Some he buried, some he watched fall. Some still haunt the back of his eyes in dreams that end without noise. There's a moment around 3:15 a.m. when he finds himself standing in the hallway, no memory of getting up. He's holding the notebook, open to a blank page. He writes one word: enough. Many people still think Gravano stayed in the game even after he left it. So what do you think? Can you ever really quit when the whole game lives inside your memory? The next morning, he calls his daughter. They don't talk often, but lately it's been better. Less ice, more room to breathe. "I got something you might want," he says. She waits. My story, not the ones they printed. Mine. She pauses. Is it a confession or a warning? Neither, he says. It's a record. For when I'm not here. She doesn't say yes, doesn't say no, just says okay. Later, he makes a copy of the notebook. Handwrites a full transcript. No digital files, no backups. Just ink and weight. He seals it in a manila envelope, writes "for Karen" on the front, and stores it in the back of his closet behind old sweaters and unopened boxes. Not ready to send it, but ready for it to exist. That evening, he makes dinner. Real dinner. Pasta, garlic bread, salad. He even sets the table. Not for guests, just for himself. It's the first time in years he's cooked like someone might join him. He eats slowly. No TV, just the sound of utensils on a ceramic plate and the occasional creak of the floorboards settling into the quiet. And then, after dishes, after a cup of black coffee cooled to lukewarm, he steps outside. No agenda, no plan. Just a man in slippers standing under a sky smeared with stars. And he says nothing, doesn't narrate, doesn't analyze. Just listens to the desert, to the wind, to the silence that, for once, doesn't feel like something waiting to break. The day begins with a knock, but not the kind that startles. 3 light taps, rhythmic, familiar. When Sammy Gravano opens the door, there's no gun, no uniform, no distant stare from someone holding old grudges. It's a young man, early 30s, crisp shirt, no tie, a quiet intensity in the way he stands. "I'm Michael," the man says. "I spoke to your daughter." Sammy raises an eyebrow. Michael continues. "She said you had something worth preserving." Gravano studies him for a long second. There's no arrogance in the kid, no fake reverence, just curiosity. with a little weight behind it. "Come in," Sammy says, stepping aside. They sit at the kitchen table. No cameras, no notebooks. Just 2 cups of coffee and a notebook sealed in a thick envelope lying between them like a third guest. Michael's not a journalist, not a cop. He's part of some private oral history project, reconstructing the untold edges of 20th century crime. "We're not looking for scandal," he explains. "We're looking for texture. The stuff that made people human." Sammy chuckles at that. "Careful," he says. "People start looking for too much texture and they end up in concrete." Michael doesn't laugh. He listens, and Gravano begins to talk. Not the public stories, not the courtroom monologues. The in-between things, like the way his hands used to tremble after a job, but only once the door closed. Like how he couldn't eat marinara sauce for a year after the Castellano hit. Like the old man in Brooklyn who used to shine shoes and always asked about Sammy's mother. Never his business. And how that little moment of decency stuck with him longer than most of the bodies. For hours, they sit in that little kitchen, the fan clicking gently overhead, the daylight sliding across the walls like a slow metronome. At one point, Michael asks, "Do you miss them? Any of them?" Sammy doesn't answer right away. He takes a sip of coffee, looks out the window. A leafless tree stirs faintly in the breeze. "I miss who we thought we were," he says. Not long after the meeting ends, Michael thanks him, asks if there's anything else he'd like added, if the envelope, still sealed, should be included in the archive. Gravano shakes his head. "That's for her." Michael nods, leaves. Sammy watches his car disappear down the street, tires whispering against sun-warmed asphalt. And then back inside, something unexpected happens. He laughs, a short, honest laugh, because all these years, he figured the story would close with silence, or maybe a bullet, or maybe just a name fading into a digital footnote. But now, there's a record. Not the one the tabloids wrote. Not the one Gotti tried to script from the shadows. His. Many people still think mobsters can't change. So what do you think? Does telling the truth undo the damage, or just clarify it? That evening, Sammy visits the storage unit. It's a small place. Humble. Anonymous. But inside, he's kept a few things. One tailored jacket, still pressed. A photo of his parents. A 1980s construction ledger, completely blank, but signed by 6 men who are all dead now. And a tiny pair of ballet shoes, his daughter's, from a recital he never made it to. He places the envelope on top of it all, closes the box, locks it. One key, no copies. Back home, the moon is rising. Pale, wide, familiar. He pours a glass of red wine, cheap stuff, nothing fancy, and takes it to the patio, sits, exhales. For the first time in decades, he feels like a man who isn't being followed. Not by agents, not by rivals, not even by his own memory. Just a man, just stillness. There's a breeze tonight. Warmer than usual. The kind that wraps around you instead of cutting through. And for once, he doesn't brace against it. He lets it hold him. A few weeks pass, and Gravano's days start to follow a rhythm so gentle, it almost feels borrowed. Wake up. Eggs. Walk. Coffee. Right. Sometimes, he drives out into the desert. Not far. Just the edge where the city starts forgetting itself. He'll sit in the car with the engine off, window down, letting the dry wind comb through his thoughts. Nothing out there moves fast. Not time, not memory, not even regret. He's not hiding anymore, not really doing anything either, just existing. And after a life built on momentum, that's a strange luxury. One afternoon, as he's flipping through a worn paperback, The Old Man and the Sea of all things, his phone buzzes. Not the burner, the real one. The one he barely gives out. It's Karen, just a text. "Did you mean for me to open it?" He doesn't reply immediately. Instead, he places the phone face down, sets the book aside, and walks to the kitchen, pours himself a glass of water. It's a small ritual, something slow, intentional. When he picks the phone back up, he types, "If you're ready, yeah, then I was." The response takes nearly an hour. "You remember everything, but you didn't write it angry. That surprised me." Gravano thinks about that. He types, "You can only stay angry if you expect things to have made sense." There's no reply after that. But he doesn't need one. The next day, a small package arrives. No note, no explanation. Inside, a framed photo. Him and Karen. She's maybe 6, missing a tooth. He's in a plain polo shirt, mid-laugh, one arm around her shoulder, holding her like something he thought he'd always have time to understand. He places the photo on the table beside his chair. It doesn't haunt him. It centers him. Later that night, he records a video. Nothing flashy. Just his face, lit softly. No notes, no script. "People always ask if I'd do it differently," he begins. "I wouldn't. Beat. I'd do it better." He smiles, not with pride, but with clarity. "See, people think the choice is between being a monster or being a victim. But sometimes, you're just the guy who cleaned up what everyone else pretended didn't exist." He ends the video, doesn't upload it, just saves it, labels it October. These clips, his oral memoirs, now fill a small hard drive in his drawer. Some he's shared, some he hasn't, but they're all his. Unedited, unearned, real. Many people still think redemption means apology. So what do you think? Can truth alone earn peace, even if it doesn't ask for forgiveness? That weekend, he drives north. Just a few hours. The roads are empty, and the sky opens up the way it used to on long-haul routes between city jobs and desert drops. He pulls off near a canyon overlook, sits on a bench carved with names and initials he doesn't recognize. For a long time, he says nothing. Then, out loud, to no one in particular, "I don't want to be remembered as a rat." The words hang there, heavy but honest. "I want to be remembered as someone who knew what silence cost." The wind picks up slightly. A bird cries in the distance, and for once, no one argues with him. He drives home after sundown. The headlights stretch ahead like a reminder that the road is always longer than you expect, but still, somehow, yours to finish. Back in his kitchen, he pours another glass of wine, eats a bowl of pasta he overcooked slightly, leaves the dishes in the sink, and before bed, he stands by the framed photo, fingers resting lightly on the edge. No prayers, no speeches, just a quiet nod. Then the lights go out, the night holds steady. A few weeks pass, and Gravano's days start to follow a rhythm so gentle, it almost feels borrowed. Wake up, eggs, walk, coffee, write. Sometimes, he drives out into the desert. Not far, just to the edge where the city starts forgetting itself. He'll sit in the car with the engine off, window down, letting the dry wind comb through his thoughts. Nothing out there moves fast. Not time, not memory, not even regret. He's not hiding anymore, not really doing anything either, just existing. And after a life built on momentum, that's a strange luxury. One afternoon, as he's flipping through a worn paperback, The Old Man and the Sea of all things, his phone buzzes. Not the burner, the real one. The one he barely gives out. It's Karen. Just a text. "Did you mean for me to open it?" He doesn't reply immediately. Instead, he places the phone face down, sets the book aside, and walks to the kitchen. Pours himself a glass of water. It's a small ritual. Something slow, intentional. When he picks the phone back up, he types, "If you're ready, yeah, then I was." The response takes nearly an hour. "You remember everything, but you didn't write it angry. That surprised me." Gravano thinks about that. He types, "You can only stay angry if you expect things to have made sense." There's no reply after that, but he doesn't need one. The next day, a small package arrives. No note, no explanation. Inside, a framed photo. Him and Karen. She's maybe 6. Missing a tooth. He's in a plain polo shirt, mid-laugh. One arm around her shoulder, holding her like something he thought he'd always have time to understand. He places the photo on the table beside his chair. It doesn't haunt him, it centers him. Later that night, he records a video. Nothing flashy, just his face, lit softly. No notes, no script. People always ask if I'd do it differently. He begins. I wouldn't. Beat. I'd do it better. He smiles, not with pride, but with clarity. See, people think the choice is between being a monster or being a victim. But sometimes, you're just the guy who cleaned up what everyone else pretended didn't exist. He ends the video. Doesn't upload it. Just saves it. Labels it October. These clips, his oral memoirs, now fill a small hard drive in his drawer. Some he's shared, some he hasn't. But they're all his. Unedited. Unearned. Real. Many people still think redemption means apology. So what do you think? Can truth alone earn peace, even if it doesn't ask for forgiveness? That weekend he drives north, just a few hours. The roads are empty, and the sky opens up the way it used to on long-haul routes between city jobs and desert drops. He pulls off near a canyon overlook, sits on a bench carved with names and initials he doesn't recognize. For a long time he says nothing. Then, out loud, to no one in particular, I don't want to be remembered as a rat. The words hang there, heavy but honest. I want to be remembered as someone who knew what silence cost. The wind picks up slightly. A bird cries in the distance, and for once, no one argues with him. He drives home after sundown. The headlights stretch ahead like a reminder that the road is always longer than you expect. But still, somehow, yours to finish. Back in his kitchen, he pours another glass of wine. Eats a bowl of pasta he overcooked slightly. Leaves the dishes in the sink, and before bed, he stands by the framed photo, fingers resting lightly on the edge. No prayers, no speeches, just a quiet nod. Then the lights go out. The night holds steady. The sky is bleeding pink when Sammy Gravano steps onto his porch the next morning. He's been waking earlier, not because of dreams, those have dulled, but because there's something calming about beating the sun to its own rise. Something ceremonial. He sips coffee, black and hot, from the same mug he's used for years. It has a chip in the handle, a crack near the lip, and no message printed on it. Just utility. Just there. Like him, the streets are still empty, except for the occasional jogger, earbuds in, breathing like they've never run from anything but calories. Gravano watches the sun crest over the neighbor's roof. Thinks about how many times he's seen it do that. How each morning comes on time whether you're ready or not. And lately, he's been ready more often than not. He started visiting a community center nearby. Quietly. No one asks who he is. Just another older guy with a notebook. Some think he's retired military. Others think he teaches poetry. He doesn't correct them. There's a chessboard in the corner. Sammy never learned to play in his younger years. Too slow, he'd once said. Too many rules. But now, it fascinates him. How people think 6 moves ahead. How one bad decision early on can make the rest of the game feel inevitable. He's not great at it, but he listens, learns. A kid there, maybe 15, plays like a killer. Fast, ruthless, smart. They've played 6 times. Sammy hasn't won once. You were probably good at other things, the kid says with a grin. Sammy chuckles. You'd be surprised. He returns each week, not for the chess, for the rhythm, the structure, the idea that a move once made doesn't have to be repeated. Let's add a bit of fact to ground us. Sammy Gravano remains one of the most controversial figures in organized crime history. His choice to flip, to testify, to later re-offend. all of it paints a portrait that's either too complicated or too convenient, depending on who's holding the brush. But here, in this moment, none of that matters, because here, he's just a man learning from a teenager with better strategy. One afternoon, after a longer match, he lasts 22 moves this time. Sammy asks the kid a question. What makes you know when it's over? The kid blinks. In chess? In anything. The kid thinks. When you stop thinking about how to fix it. When you know the next move just makes it worse. Sammy nods. Smart. That night, he writes it down, adds it to the notebook. A different one now, smaller, less crowded, more like a diary than a confession. Inside it, phrases, moments, no full sentences. October, Karen smiled. Burned letter of peace, sunrise 6:12 a.m., felt real. He never meant to track peace like a parole officer. But maybe this is his version of accountability. Still, not everything is soft. A news article pops up on his feed one evening. An old associate, found dead in Jersey. Natural causes. But the name alone stirs sediment in his chest. He stares at the obituary photo for a long time. Then, without thinking, deletes the browser tab and walks out onto the patio. He looks up at the stars. Arizona skies give more of them than Brooklyn ever did. They're cold, clear, unbothered by history. He thinks about the names again. The ones still out there. The ones buried under the wrong tombstones. The ones whose kids probably have no idea why Christmas always felt strange. Many people still think Gravano sees himself as the last man standing. So what do you think? If your story outlives everyone else's, does that make you wise or just left behind? He doesn't answer, not even to himself. He finishes his wine, pulls a blanket around his shoulders, listens to the desert hum, then whispers, not to anyone in particular. I'm still here. Just those 3 words. Not proud, not afraid, just present. And for tonight, that's enough. There's a silence that follows you. Even after everyone else has stopped talking, Sammy Gravano has grown used to it. The way quiet presses into your ribs when the past finally runs out of new material. He doesn't fight it anymore. He just moves through it, like a swimmer used to current. Lately, his routine includes a dusty little bookstore on the east end of town. Not big, not busy. But the woman behind the counter knows her paperbacks and doesn't ask questions. He likes that. He doesn't browse for mob books. He avoids the crime section entirely. Instead, he finds himself drawn to biographies, explorers, exiles, pilots who went down in oceans, presidents who aged too fast. He sits for hours sometimes, reading in the back corner. No one ever recognizes him there, and yet he still chooses the seat facing the entrance. One day, the woman at the counter asks what he's reading. He holds up a copy of Into the Wild. That one's sad, she says. The kid just disappears. Sammy nods. Yeah, he says, but he went quiet on purpose. That's different. She tilts her head. And you didn't. He doesn't answer, just closes the book and checks out. Later, driving home, he thinks about that. Did he go quiet on purpose? He didn't plan it that way. The silence wasn't the goal. It was just what was left after everything else had burned down. That night, he opens his email. There's a message from Karen. Subject line, just thinking. It's short. You said once the past doesn't forget you. I think maybe you were wrong. Maybe it forgives you when you finally stop asking it to. He reads it 3 times. Doesn't reply. But he smiles. Small, private. A smile for someone who learned how to speak in letters, not loud apologies. Later, while writing, he revisits something he hasn't touched in months. The list. The full unfiltered one. Everyone. Names. Dates. Decisions. Not for publication. Not for therapy. Just for truth. He'd stopped updating it years ago, thinking maybe it was better to let the book close. But tonight, he picks up the pen and adds one more name, his own. Not at the top, not at the bottom, just in the middle, where things break. Many people still think Sammy Gravano's greatest crime wasn't murder or betrayal, but survival. So what do you think? When a man outlives his era, is that justice or just unfinished business? The next morning he walks again, same block. Same dog barking 2 houses down. Same quiet nod from the retired school teacher on the corner. But this time something's different. Someone left a folded piece of paper in his mailbox. No envelope. It reads, "Some debts don't go away." No name. No return address. He stands there holding it, the desert sun already heating the edges. Then he folds it twice, tucks it into his pocket, and continues walking. No change in pace, no flinch, because fear left him years ago. What he carries now isn't fear, it's calculation. And that's always been sharper. That night he sleeps with the lights off. Door locked, of course. Gun within reach, as always. But no anxiety, just routine. He dreams of the Ravenite for the first time in months. Except in the dream, the chairs are empty. He's alone, and no one comes in. Not Gotti, not Frankie, not Polly or Nikki or Tadu. Just Sammy, pouring his own drink, waiting on no one. And maybe that's the final picture. A man alone in the club he once helped fill, knowing he's still alive, still standing, but for the first time, truly, finally, not waiting for anyone to walk through the door. Rain in Arizona always feels borrowed, like the sky's remembering something it used to do. It doesn't pour so much as soften. Pavement darkens, rooftops hiss, and inside his house, Sammy Gravano listens to the drops hit the windows like fingers drumming from somewhere far away. He's reading again. Same corner of the same bookstore, now with a stack of journals tucked beside him. Books on war, on politics, on men who led and then lost. He underlines things sometimes, but rarely the obvious quotes. More often, it's the ones that slip past others. The hard part isn't the fall. It's deciding when to stop climbing. That one he circles twice. He's not climbing anymore. He knows that. But the descent? That part, he's still figuring out. A call comes in that evening. Michael, the oral historian. There's a project in New York. A museum piece. A limited archive of oral testimonies from former underworld figures, law enforcement, and surviving relatives. They want to include a portion of Gravano's tapes. Sammy asks one question. Will it be for education or entertainment? Michael doesn't miss a beat. Both. Gravano hangs up. He spends the next 2 hours pacing the house, past old windows, cold coffee, and a framed photograph that still hasn't collected dust because he cleans it once a week without realizing it. Eventually he calls back, tells Michael to use the tapes, but only under one condition. They don't edit me into something I wasn't. No hero, no devil, just real. Michael agrees, and so the voice of Sammy Gravano will live inside a digital archive, cataloged somewhere between historical fact and uneasy memory. He doesn't tell Karen, not yet. That night, she calls him. No agenda, just tired. They talk about nothing for a while. Groceries, the heat, a flat tire she fixed on her own. He listens, smiles, and then she says something unexpected. "I had a dream you were young again." Same voice, just less heavy. He waits. "I think that's the first time I saw you smile in my sleep." He doesn't know what to say to that, so he just says, "I like that." She asks, "Do you still write?" "Every day." "Will you send me something?" "Not yet," he says, "but soon." After the call, he pulls out the smaller notebook, the second one, the one that doesn't list names, just fragments, feelings. He adds a new line. "She saw me light." No punctuation. That's how he writes now, as if the ending should stay open. Many people still think that men like Gravano can't feel softness. So what do you think? Can decades of steel ever fold into something gentle? Or does every scar still press from the inside? The next morning, He returns to the chessboard at the community center. The kid is there. Same hoodie, same sharp grin. They play in silence, move for move, midway through. Sammy surprises him with a feint. Sacrifices a piece the kid didn't expect. It sets up a counter the kid doesn't see coming. Gravano wins. The kid leans back, eyes wide. That was sneaky, Sammy smirks. You think I got this old without learning how to lose on purpose a few times? The kid laughs. You're good, Sammy shakes his head. I'm just patient. He leaves the center that day walking slower, but lighter. There's no need to be the toughest man in the room anymore. Just the one still thinking. Back home, he opens the box in the closet. The one with the ballet shoes and the sealed envelope. He removes the envelope, opens it. Reads his own handwriting like it belongs to someone he once knew but doesn't entirely recognize. Then he tears it in half, not out of shame, but because it's been said now, the story exists. Elsewhere, on record, in memory. It doesn't need to live in a box anymore. He replaces the ballet shoes gently, keeps the photo, closes the box, and this time, he doesn't lock it. Some endings aren't loud. They don't crack or collapse or flare up like dying stars. Some just fold into the quiet. Sammy Gravano sits on his porch in the early dusk, a blanket draped over his knees, the air thick with the kind of warmth that's earned. He watches the light fade without chasing it. No shadows to outrun now. Just evening, arriving on time. The neighborhood is still. A dog barks 3 blocks over. A lawn sprinkler ticks somewhere in the dark. A kid bikes by, hoodie flapping, earbuds in, utterly unaware that he just passed one of the most dangerous men to ever walk the streets of Brooklyn. And Gravano doesn't mind. Obscurity, it turns out, is a kind of mercy. He gets a letter the next day. Real paper, real envelope, handwriting neat but unfamiliar. It's from someone in New York, a man whose father used to work a no-show job on one of Sammy's construction sites in the 80s. The letter is polite, honest, a little raw. I grew up on the money you skimmed, it reads. We had Christmas because of your racket, and I still don't know how to feel about that. Sammy folds the letter, places it between the pages of a book. The sun also rises. Hemingway. Fitting. That afternoon, he meets Karen for lunch. She's flown in. Not a long visit, just time. She brings a box of old cassette tapes. Found them while clearing a storage unit. They're unlabeled, dusty, faded. He recognizes them immediately. Interviews, depositions. Some of the earliest tapes he gave the feds back before the courtroom, before the deal, before the silence began. Thought you might want to do something with them, she says. He runs his fingers over the plastic, smiles faintly. Maybe, he says, or maybe they've done enough already. They eat in silence for a while. Then she says, you talk differently now, slower. He nods. Not rushing means you hear your own words better. She leans in. You ever wish you'd done that earlier? No, he says. Because back then, I didn't want to hear them. They finish lunch. Say goodbye like people who know how to make the next meeting happen. That night, Sammy opens his notebook, his final one. The pages are thin now, almost gone. He writes, truth doesn't undo anything, but it asks less of your sleep. Then he closes it, puts it beside the others. No need to label it. Karen will know which is which. Later, while sitting in the dark, he hears a knock on the door. Gentle, familiar. He opens it to find no one there. Just a breeze, just the night, just that old feeling again. That some part of him never really left New York. It just lives in the silence between the streetlights and the sirens. In the space between who he was and who he quietly chose not to be anymore. Many people still think Sammy Gravano escaped judgment. So what do you think? If you carry your past long enough, does it count as penance or just weight? He doesn't answer. Not tonight. Instead, he goes to the kitchen, makes tea, sits by the window, and watches the world not need him anymore. And finally, that feels okay.